I began my time at Ohio State 20 years ago. I had just finished up graduate school at Duke University. I had a fellowship at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa, and Ohio State had an opening in the history department for a person who did 20th century African American history. That was my area of focus and research, specifically the Civil Rights Movement. It was a joint appointment, half in history and half with the Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity. Kirwan was just being started. I was the first faculty appointment, and I was really intrigued by the opportunity to continue to do research, scholarship, teaching, but then also have this opportunity to engage with public policy. I'm focused on questions of race and ethnicity. And so I made the trek across the Ohio River from Alabama to Ohio. From the very beginning, my time here at Ohio State has been interdisciplinary, focused very much in history. That has always been the home. But I've always looked for these ways to engage the public, whether that is teachers or policymakers. And so working with the Kirwan Institute at a full-time joint appointment for the first 10 years or so, but I still affiliate with them in various ways over the years, has provided me that opportunity to continue that interdisciplinary work. When I think about professional collaborations at Ohio State, you don't go in with sort of a hard and fast plan. I'm going to do this. I'm going to look for these people. You kind of go in with sort of an open mind because you never know what people are doing and how their work may intersect and interact with yours. So the last couple of years, I've been working with the Global Arts and Humanities Discovery theme, which has been fantastic because it's centered around the humanities. I bring the perspective of a historian, but we're working with people in literature and arts and dance and music. And it's amazing the kind of collaborative opportunities that come out of it. Sometimes it's, a concrete project, but sometimes you're just sitting and thinking. And as you engage with people in other disciplines, you begin to think about your work differently. Not only the work that you've completed, but also the work that you can do going forward. New concentric circles are always being added when you're doing interdisciplinary work, which is really the exciting aspect of it. It's boring if you're only doing what you know. But when you move into areas that are unfamiliar to you, you're continuing this process of learning. And that's what it means to be an academic, right? You're not only researching things that you know, you engage in this process of discovery. In the humanities, that's what we're doing. We're trying to discover new ways of thinking about the present, of imagining and thinking about the past, and imagining and thinking about the future. One of the things that I've been appreciative about being at Ohio State and about this professorship in particular is it allows me the time, space, opportunity, and resources to think creatively, to imagine. But it has also allowed me those same opportunities to actually build, to put into practice that which I'm thinking about and researching. That has manifested itself in part through the Teaching Institute program on difficult subjects I've been able to direct through the Global Arts and Humanities Discovery theme, but then also building partnerships outside of the university. I mean, that public history engagement has really been exciting. And that's where you see some of the building, where you're putting, into practice your discoveries, your thinking, your approach to sort of politics, your approach to society. And that is really, that's a lot of fun. There have been a number of collaborations that, within the last year have really taken off, that have deep roots with, extended project. One of them is with the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, Tennessee, which is the site of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I've been working with them over the last year on a renovation of the second half of the museum. A number of years ago, I was the lead content historian for the renovation of the core museum. We did that, $25 million, that was into that money. But there was a second half. And so we're exploring the civil rights movement after King's assassination. So really for the last 50 years or so. And that's been exciting, being able to conceive and conceptualize how we interpret that history for, 500,000 visitors who will come through there on an annual basis. So being able to be a part of that project, that collaborative project, again, down in Memphis, Tennessee, is really exciting. Another partnership, another collaboration that has been ongoing is with Learning for Justice, which is the education arm of the Southern Poverty Law Center. They have developed a program and project around hard history, which sort of a concept I developed for understanding how we understand and frame some of the difficult aspects of America's past. Went down there this summer in Montgomery, Alabama, and teaching hard history, the first hard history teaching institute, which was really fantastic, and bringing teachers from all over the country in this instance to learn about not only the content of America's past, difficult aspects of America's past, but how to teach it and to do it in a way that's accurate and effective, especially in this moment in time when it's becoming increasingly difficult to do that. And there is really a movement afoot to prevent us from doing that very thing. So the audience for the Learning for Justice Institute of Hard History is K through 12. I've really, the last few years, but really accelerating the last year, have been working hard with K through 12 teachers. One of the things that I've always been driven by is this desire to not keep the work that I do, not keep the scholarship that I do limited to a handful of scholars. When you want to have the conversations with your colleagues, both here on campus and nationally and internationally, but you also have to translate the work that you do. One of the audiences that I'm most interested in reaching are teachers. I would have become a high school teacher, but I had a patience for high school kids, right? But, I appreciate and value the reach of K through 12. Working with teachers, working with school districts here in Ohio, working with school districts nationally, but working with programs that work with teachers. So Learning for Justice, for example, starting that hard history teaching institute specifically on how do we teach hard history. But I've also collaborated with Gilder Lehrman Institute with their teaching programs, which has been a lot of fun. I spent a couple days in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, a summer ago, and going back next summer, 4 or 5 day immersive teacher training in which I lead a course on the civil rights movement. And so being able to sort of share, what I've been able to piece together, my understanding about African-American history, and share that with teachers and help them frame how they teach to their students is really important to me. And one of the things that this professorship has enabled me to continue to do and expand. So the work that I do, particularly around art history and, getting the public and getting teachers to confront the difficult aspects of our past, doesn't mean that everybody's going to get on board. And, as an educator, we like to think that education is the key to solving all problems. That ain't so. The truth is that we can teach truth. We can help people see truth. We can help people seek truth. But the truth in and of itself is not enough to change the world. We understand that you have to rely on truth to impact sort of decisions that you're making, but in a world in which people will intentionally reject facts to reach a particular political aim and objective, means that just sharing facts, just sharing truth, isn't enough to right the wrong. And so one of the things that drove me to become a historian in the first place, and why I chose to focus on the civil rights movement, is because I was interested in organizing. I was interested in social movement organizing. How do you create change? Not just sort of in the mind of an individual, but how do you create change in society? And so looking at the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement, and how do you change a place that has zero registered voters and a long history of racial violence and terrorism, which is the focus of my first book on Loudoun County, Alabama, into a place where they developed their own political party to seize power. Like, these are the lessons that we have to take moving forward. So yes, we have to do the work of sharing truth and sharing facts, but we also have to be prepared to engage in the kind of political organizing work that moves, that creates change, that exerts the force necessary that we need to create change. The students here at Ohio State, they get that. That's why they're coming in and want to take a course on civil rights movement. They're like, how do we change the world? I'm like, okay, here's the first two steps, right? But I think it's that, right? We have to recognize and realize that, a lot of what we're doing and talking about and the policy decisions that are being made that are just wrong, sort of the whitewashing of history standards down in Florida, mean that you may not be able to have myself an impact on what's going on in Florida. But when the state of Connecticut reaches out and says, Dr. Jeffries, we're working on a new set of social studies standards for elementary and high school, middle school, high school in Connecticut. Can you help us out? I'm on board, right? And we've come up with just a remarkable new set of standards that engage with hard history. And so that's education, that's working with truth and facts, but that's also about political power, right? And having an influence on those who are in positions to impact policy. And so we have to do the work of informing, but we also have to do the work of political organizing as well. So African American history is one component of what we understand to be African American studies. And of course, here at Ohio State, we have African American Studies, African American Studies Department, which is one of the earliest departments in sort of U.S. at U.S. universities. It is a strong department. It can get stronger. It will get stronger. It will continue to grow. It will continue to be, I think, a beacon for the study of African American studies, African American studies, not just in the Midwest, not just in the nation, but really internationally. That's where I see AAAS, being and where it should be. And I think within that, African American history, the courses that I teach, the courses that my colleagues that have joint appointments with us in history that we teach are central to it. Because, in addition to the literature and the music and the art and the political science, you have to understand the historical context out of which all of that emerges. And so history provides that context. And African American history provides that context, not only for understanding the African American experience, of course, which is important in and of itself, but the power of African American history is that it serves as a prism through which to explore the broader American experience, the larger American experience. You can't understand U.S. history, its origin, and its evolution, without understanding the African American experience. And once you understand the African American experience, then U.S. history looks completely different. American history, its evolution over time, looks completely different. So the goal, of course, as a historian of the African American journey, is to make sure that our students understand the past, and in this context, the American past, the experiences of African Americans, so that they can make sense of the present. Right? I mean, this isn't just sort of, hey, this is some interesting academic pursuit exercise. No. The purpose of this is so you can make sense of the present. And even with that, I think our challenge towards students, and this is part of, I think, the power of African American history, is when you study it to make sense of the past, to understand the present, then you are better prepared to deal with the challenges of the future. So the classes that I teach on African American history, civil rights movement, contemporary Black experience have to do with the present. We build towards the present. We have wonderful students at the Ohio State University, but they come from a range of backgrounds, a range of experiences, genders, ideologies, um, incomes, and it really is a diverse spectrum of folk who wind up in my classes. And I tell them on day one, look, I'm not here to change anybody's mind. That is not my expectation. My expectation is that you enter into this class with an open. That's what I want. That's what I need. And so what I hope that they'll get out of that, having that open mind, is that they will view the world differently. Like, I want them to view the world differently. That doesn't mean I want them to view the world the way I do. If I've done my work, then they've learned something that will help them make sense and see the world a little bit differently with that open mind. And then they'll engage the world a little bit differently. I think that's critical. So I don't have sort of, a checklist of beliefs that I want them to espouse on there. No, that's nonsense, right? I want them to critically engage the world in ways that they didn't do before. I think if they do that, I think we're all in a better place. And I think they're better people, not just better historians, not just better students. I think they're better people. There's value in having a healthy skepticism rooted in knowledge and understanding and reality. And I think if they are able to carry that with them into the world, then I've done my job. So when I first found out that I had received the professorship, and I was like, "Are you kidding? Right? Like, me? You sure about this?" But then, I was humbled by the recognition and grateful for the recognition, and then, quickly turned my attention to, how can I make the most of this honor and this opportunity. One, it's just an honor to be recognized with that kind of investment on the part of alumni, on the part of the university, saying we value the work that you were doing, but we're not just going to give you a pat on the back. We're going to say do more. And I've been able to do more. I mean, that's been sort of the charge to the battery. Like, okay, now you have these extra resources. How are you going to do more? That means, how are you going to engage the public more? How are you going to do some more writing? How are you going to attend some more conferences, right? And it's been amazing, the opportunities that have come about as a result of that. Reaching the public, not just with teachers, as we talked about before, but reaching the public in other ways through PBS documentaries I've been able to consult on and serve as advisor on and the like, thinking about new and creative ways of engaging teachers, not only from teacher institutes, but the curriculum development and the like, being able to bring teachers here to Ohio State through the Global Arts and Humanities Discovery theme and have the Difficult Subjects Teaching Institute and being able to expand that. We started with talking about history. Last year, we were able to branch out, serving as director, able to branch out and have a whole cohort on climate justice. And we're thinking about what's the next step that we're going to be able to do with that. So the professorship has really been amazing. And for me, it's like, okay, here was the bar before, right? Now we got the pat on the back and the resources. All right, so the bar is here, right? And now we have to step up and meet the bar. And I think about it in sort of three ways. How can I expand the work that I'm doing on campus? So that's reimagining my teaching, right? For the students who are coming out of, the last few years that have served as the political anchors for their lives, right? I mean, the transition from, the Trump presidency to the Biden presidency, the global pandemic, the largest protest in American history in the summer of 2020. These are the politicizing events for students who are coming to Ohio State. So I have to rethink how I engage them in the classroom as we talk about issues around civil rights, civil liberties, and social justice. And so the professorship has allowed me to bring in other resources and to give me some time and space to think about how to be a better teacher with the students who are coming into my classroom. So that's one thing. Thinking about how do I engage with Ohio State faculty in the sort of collaborative processes, but then also ways in which I can bring the public, the community here in Central Ohio and Columbus to campus. And for me, that's been working with teachers and bringing teachers to campus to be a part of this institute. And then there's sort of the national, like we're working with the students, we're working with Central Ohio and teachers in the community around here. Now, what are the other national organizations that I can find collaboration with and partnerships, whether that's public museums like the National Civil Rights Museum, or teaching institutes like Common Power Institute, working with teachers, or with Learning for Justice. And so all of those I see are connected, but they're different aspects of public history that the professorship has really allowed me to be a part of. And then the last part, right, is, how do we define the work that we do in ways that engage the public? But then also, this is, Research One, The Ohio State University. And so having the time and opportunity also to continue to engage in the scholarship. The scholarship fuels everything. So working on and expanding a new project that's working on civil rights in New York, but then also translating some of the work that I've been doing around hard history into a smaller book project on how do we teach this and how do we engage with the public in an academic way. And so the professorship has really allowed me to do all of those things, and I'm really grateful for it. While you have the resources and the opportunity, you got to put both feet in. When I reflect on my time so far at The Ohio State University, there have been a number of milestones that I have been, very proud of individually, but then also some collectively. So I don't think there's necessarily sort of one that I can point to. I think there's a collection of, the publication of my first book and receiving tenure, right? It's like, okay, cool, right? That means I can stay here and I can keep going. But that's kind of personal, right? But when I think about some of the other sort of milestones of my career at Ohio State, they're less personal and more collective. It's, receiving the teaching award from the College of Arts and Science. I mean, that was student driven, student led. I mean, and that really is a remarkable and humbling recognition, right? That the work that you've been putting in, the students themselves recognize and appreciate that work. Bringing teachers, getting the Difficult Subjects Institute off the ground, and bringing teachers from across Central Ohio to really engage with the difficult subjects of our hard history and climate justice, and seeing that come to fruition and spending each of the last few springs doing that. We initially started it right before the pandemic hit. We were like, okay, I guess we're not doing it, but what we, did it online, and now we're bringing people in person. And I'm still amazed when, I send out the call and I'm like, okay, nobody's coming to this. And yet, we get all these folks, dozens of people coming and be a part of that. And so seeing that work get off the ground and grow is, I don't know if it qualifies as a milestone, but it's something I'm really excited about and proud that we're able to do here at Ohio State. A couple of the current book projects that I have going on. One is helping to translate some of the work that I've been doing around teaching these difficult subjects. And so it is a co-authored book called Understanding and Teaching Jim Crow America, which is really centered for college teachers, sort of who have to teach about America during the Jim Crow era, how to teach it effectively, how to teach it accurately. And then also has a broader sort of public use for K-12 teachers about resources. So, continuing with my emphasis on teaching and the importance of teaching the work that we're doing. Then there's another book project that I'm working on hard history explicitly. So bringing all of the work. Why are we having so much difficulty in this particular moment, wrestling with those difficult aspects of our past that make us uncomfortable? So this is a smaller book project, more of a think piece, right? Like helping us as parents, as teachers, as preachers and politicians and citizens, like how do we make sense of this? And then offering a roadmap for how do we get past it? How do we deal with it? The importance of it, but then also how do we move forward with it? I mean, that is drawing on not only the work that I've been doing with teachers, but then also with public institutions like James Madison's Montpelier, which is the historic site of the fourth president of the United States. And working with them over the last couple of years, serve as the chair of the board of directors there now. And we're trying to do that work, right? How do you translate the work of the father of the Constitution, who was also an enslaver, enslaved over 100 people over the course of his lifetime, never freed a single soul. How do we reconcile those two? And so bringing all of that work into this smaller book on our history. And then finally, the third sort of book project is the ongoing monograph that I've been working on New York, sort of in the shadow of civil rights, looking at New York in the 1980s, but beginning in the late 1970s and carrying it through up until the early 1990s, the transition from African-American Mayor David Dinkins to Rudolph Giuliani. And so we sort of bookended like that. But it's really saying, okay, we had the civil rights movement, we had the Black Power movement, which is the subject of my first monograph, my first book. So what happens after? Right? We can't go from civil rights to Barack Obama. Right? And the 1980s are this critical moment where we see African Americans having to deal with the impact of Reaganomics, having to deal with the rise of the war on drugs, the beginning of mass incarceration, and the responses, right? The activism of young people centered around the anti-apartheid struggle, the birth and rise of hip hop, which isn't just a cultural art form, it really is a political expression of political critique. And so I'm really having a lot of fun digging into that era. So that's the third book project. So I've had the opportunity to have a number of really formative relationships with members of the Ohio State community, both with faculty, with administration, with graduate students, and with undergraduates. I think about sort of the students I've been blessed to have the opportunity to interact with and to teach. And one student among many comes to mind, a young lady by the name of Megan Duvall. She was an undergraduate in my class a few years ago, showed up in my civil rights class, 2017. And, I haven't been able to shake her since. She took the civil rights class, then she took my African American history and film class, and we read through all the classes that I teach. And then, she was like, well, Dr. Jeffries, I don't have anything else, to take. She was like, then she said, well, we need to come up with one. So she started design and independent studies. And I was like, okay, fine, come on, let's go. And she was just phenomenal. So then when I developed this idea to take students to sort of do a domestic sort of study abroad. And I was like, look, if we can send students around the world, we need to take some students here in the United States. And I wound up taking them down to Virginia, to James Madison's plantation estate to study the color line, to study race in America from the colonial era to the present. And Megan was one of the first students in that small group of 13. When I got them together, I tapped her. I said, Megan, come on, we gotta go to Virginia. She was like, I'm in. So she came on to Virginia, and it was an amazing experience. Probably the best teaching experience that I've ever had. Just watching them sort of explore the reality and the power of place, and then the discussions and conversations that we had after. Megan graduated during the pandemic. So she took all the classes and she graduated in 2020, of course. And that spring, graduation was canceled. And so in June, I got an email from her mom. Megan was from here in Columbia. I got an email from her mom. She said, Dr. Jeffries, we're going to have a graduation ceremony for Megan. Socially distanced, masked, we're going to have one. And we would like for you to come and present her with her diploma. And so I was like, well, it's going to be a surprise, so don't say anything. And so, of course, I said, I will be honored to do so. And so that Saturday morning, had my robe, cap and gown, and went to her home they had in the backyard. And then, she was in her cap and gown, and then out of the kitchen, here I come. It was my first graduation address, was to Megan Duvall, Ohio State Buckeye in front of her family. As she since has gone on to go to law school at Rutgers in Camden, focusing on social justice, and is likely to wind up serving as a public defender down in Philadelphia. And just to see her growth, to see her commitment. She came back this summer to visit her mom, and I was like, Megan, you got to come over. And she came over, we had some pizza, with the kids, and we were talking. And I was sitting down listening to her. I was learning from her, from the experiences that she was having as a third-year law student already working in a public defender's office. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna be learning from you for the rest of my life. And I think that sort of relationship really embodies, I think, sort of the spirit of what it means to be a part of this Buckeye community. The work that I do is not something that I leave behind when I close the doors in my office in Dulles Hall. The subject matter, African American history, contemporary politics, social justice, social movements, is something that I carry with me all the time. It's something I'm thinking about all the time. And it absolutely sort of impacts the way that I walk through the world, the conversations that I have. People will see a snippet on PBS and get excited. And if I run into them, then they have something to say. It's like, okay, great. My daughter was taking her photographs for her middle school soccer team, and the photographer right here in Columbus said, "By the way, I'm a fan of your dad." And she was like, "Oh, you know who my dad is?" I saw the name, Hasan Jeffries. I see him on PBS. So I went to pick her up. My daughter tells me, and I was like, "Oh, let me go say hello." And to be able to talk to the photographer, right? It was a fan of me. He was being very generous. He's a fan of PBS. He's a fan of history, right? And I was like, "Oh, let's talk about this," right? And so it absolutely impacts sort of the conversations that I'm able to have with people, right, who are thinking about how to change the world. Same conversation that I'm having with students, with the Megan Duvals, right? How are we trying to change the world and make it for the better? And so, that's always something I'm excited about. But it also is something that, sort of impacts the way that I parent, right? I mean, I have three beautiful, lovely, smart daughters, age 13, 11, and 8. And we have these conversations. And we've been having these conversations for when they were, as soon as they could talk, right? Little oldest one is 4 years old. She falls, she scrapes her knee, colors in the house, she's tears coming down. She's like, I'm like, what happened? She said, "Oh, I hurt my knee." I'm like, "Okay, sit down. Let me get the Band-Aid. Let's also talk about the middle passage if you want to talk about pain," right? So from an early age, we're going to talk about these things, right? And to see them now as they get a little older in middle school and even moving through elementary school, my youngest one, when they come back, right, when something clicks, right? The baby's talking about, she fell in love with Hamilton, as many a person can relate to. And then, at one point she's like, "Well, wait a minute, you know, Daddy, slavery's going on. Was Hamilton an enslaver?" Right? And I'm like, "Yeah, he was. That's the historical record." So now she has to reconcile these songs that she loves to sing, right, with what she understands slavery to be, at age 6 or 7, knows it's not right. Well, tell me some more about what this thing is. And her conclusion was, "Okay, I understand it's not historically accurate, but I'm gonna sing the songs anyway." Like, that's fine, as long as you understand where the shortcomings are, even at age 6 or 7. The complexity of that understanding will change as she grows, but the seed is already planted. So I'm constantly taking, sort of my work home. Not always getting it right, the conversation. Sometimes I take it in a direction. I'm like, let me reimagine that, right? Let me rethink that. But the point is that we're having conversation, right? We're thinking about these things collectively, right? We're thinking about these things publicly. So whether it's the youngest daughter or it's the photographer, being able to have a candid conversation, I think is so important, and one that's rooted in facts, one that's rooted in reality. If we can have more of that, I think we'll all be in a better place. When historians talk about generations, we talk about sort of 20 years, right? Which is the entire time I've been here at the Ohio State University. But when we think about students, we really have to think about generations being kind of 7 years, right? Because the first, 8 or 9, 10 years or so, I mean, they're not really that much in tune with the outside world. But around 8 or 9 or 10, 10 or 11, they start to have their first real sort of, it's not quite understanding of the world, but first sort of conscious political memories, public memories of what's going on. So if we think about that today, right, this is a generation whose really first political memory is the election of Donald Trump. For some who are sort of moving at the higher levels, they may remember sort of 2014, the emergence of Black Lives Matter, 2015, but it's within that gap, right? 2015 to 2017. Think of all they've encountered, right? Black Lives Matter, the first African American president, the rise of racial hate connected to the presidency of Donald Trump, the global pandemic, the largest mass protests in summer of 2020. You put all that together, what you find is that these students are serious. These students are serious about change, and they're serious about changing the world. Think about this is also the generation of kids who came up with school shootings and protests around school shootings. And so they're serious about not accepting that which is not right. This generation, last 30 years, they have a very strong sense of justice and injustice. Now, they're working on trying to articulate it. They're working on trying to understand it, and they're working on trying to solve it. That's fine. That's what we're here for, right? To help them make sense of the world and to give them the tools that they need to solve the problems that we have. And to me, that's really energizing. And to see them come in and wrestle with these issues. And so when they were in my class, I'm like, okay, what's your position? What's your point? Now you have to back it up, grounded in facts and reality. And now I'm going to push you on it, right? Like, to me, it doesn't really matter where you fall on the political spectrum. I'm going to push you, right? Because you have to be able to defend your position, especially if you're one of those students who are interested in trying to make a real difference, not just thinking about yourself and how, financially secure you may be down the road. You come out of Ohio State, you'll be successful. But what are you going to do to make a difference and an impact? And the number of students who are coming into my classes, who are coming to Ohio State now, for whom that is really the drive, that has increased, and that's exciting, right? Because then I want to hear from them. Tell me about your experiences. Tell me what you're thinking. What solutions are you thinking about? How are you planning for change? How are you planning to expand upon the things that are right and change the things that are wrong? And so, I'm constantly listening and constantly tweaking my classes, one, to meet their demands and expectations, but also because I get something from them. It's like, this is the way we should be seeing the world. Okay, I get it. Teach me more, right? And then we go forward. Academics aren't very good at separating, right? So the professional from the personal. So we're always sort of, taking on work with. So in my downtime, I tend to do things that allow me some quiet, but then also in that quiet, some time to think. So strangely enough, I'm always doing sort of, DIY projects sort of around the house, but building, right? Like building bookcases and, redesigning a room or redoing the mantelpiece, and a lot of craft stuff. But I realized that actually allowed me, one, sort of quiet and time to think, but it was also something that was kind of immediate, and which is not something that you really get from academia. You work on a book project, that might be 7 or 8 years, right, before you actually can hold the book in your hand. But if you are doing some wall trim, right, you give me a good weekend, you can look around, sit back and like, oh, okay, good job. And so a lot of sort of craft stuff that I do, but I'm also a big sports fan, right? And it helps to be at the Ohio State University when you are a sports fan. Downtime includes, sort of enjoying, sort of watching TV in that age where I can't play as much, or to be as good as I used to be, I thought I was in the past. So, being able to enjoy sports, especially as my kids get a little older. And my oldest daughter was 13, who was a huge Buckeye fan, right? I just teach here apparently, right? This is a child who was born over at the hospital overlooking the shoe. I mean, she bleeds scarlet and gray, and to sort of see her come into her own as a big football fan, as a big Buckeye fan, has been a lot of fun. So transitioning where I'm getting a lot of joy from seeing the fun that they have as a sports fan and them playing sports and enjoying sports on TV.